now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. This is Heather Hildebrandt with North Carolina DOT, and I am very happy to be presenting the second of two identical regional freight updates on what we're doing with respect to the freight plan that is due this November. We'll give everyone just about another minute to join, and then we will go ahead and get started. Just as a reminder, and we'll have these a little bit further down in the slides, if you are not talking, please leave yourself on mute, leave your camera off to help with bandwidth issues, as well as we move forward. If you have any questions, there is both a question and a chat box. We ask that you put any questions or comments in either of those two. They will both be monitored during this presentation. Okay, Kip, we can go ahead and go to the first slide. This is the agenda for today. So we're going to be just basically going over where we're going with respect to the freight plan and where we are in the process. And just to let you know that there is going to be some interactivity within the during the presentation. Next slide, Kip. So just again, as a reminder, basically, if you've got anything else open, it's a good idea to close those applications down. It may cause some bandwidth issues on your end. Turn off your webcams if you're not speaking. This actually creates a bandwidth issue for everyone. There are, like I said, indicated previously, there are two chat functionalities. There's both a questions as well as a chat. Those both will be monitored. And then this webinar is being recorded, and the slides will be made available at the end of both presentations. Next slide. As I indicated previously, we will have some interactivity, so please take a moment right now to either use via your computer browser, publicinput.com/freight, or if you prefer, you can use your cell phone by texting freight to 984-205-6615. And this information will also be in the chat if you, as we move to the next slide, where we will be doing our initial polling question to kind of get you guys up to speed and online with that application. Again, I just want to thank you all for your participation. It's very important for us to get your feedback on this plan as we develop it. And we will be having a survey following this presentation afterwards with more in-depth questions and giving you additional opportunity to respond to some of the questions we will also be asking you during this presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to our consultant, HNTB, to start the presentation. Kip.
Good morning, everyone. We're glad you're here. Looking forward to your participation. So this first slide is really just an icebreaker. We'd like you to put in there what region do you represent of the state, or are you in a neighboring state? So I'll give everyone a little bit of time to fill that out, and then I'll show the results to everybody. Again, you go to either the website, publicinput.com/freight, or you can text freight to the phone number shown there on the slide. So let's see if the results are coming in. Let me hit the refresh. There we go. So we've got 25 responses in there, and you can see the breakdown. We've got quite a few. A third of them are from neighboring states, so that's great because a freight network does not stop at the state border. And then we've got a large number from the western part of the state, and then a distribution from the eastern, central, and statewide. So excellent. Thank you very much for that. That gives us a good understanding of who we're talking to. Let's go to, we have one more icebreaker. What industry sector do you represent? So you can see all the different modes listed there. If you can just give us a little bit of information on what industry you're representing. Give you 30 seconds to go there. And let me refresh, make sure I've got everyone's information in. So what industry sector do you represent? Almost half, or 44%, are highway, and then other, and then are quite a bit, shippers, truckers. If you put in other, we'd love to hear in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute, what that represents. I did notice that there could have been a button on intermodal, so it might represent intermodal, but if you could put in the chat what you meant by other, that'll help us out. And Nastasha, you're monitoring that, right? You'll let us know if anyone puts any chats in.
Yes, I do have you. The only thing that we've gotten so far is Henderson, North Carolina, was an addition.
Refresh one more time just to make sure. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on. And I think, John, we're going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Kip. Good morning, everybody. This is just a quick overview of the freight planning process. So as you see there, freight planning process is the green funnel there. There's the different steps. You have your visions, goals, and objectives, the freight system inventory and assessment. You have your commodity flow analysis, your multimodal needs assessment, project prioritization, and then implementation strategies. But the important thing to look at this is, if you look on the left, there's that blue arrow that goes down through all of it. And statewide outreach and engagement is extremely important. And that's why we're having these forums 2 days ago and today. We want your input. We want to hear what people think about freight planning, what needs to be done, and what the issues are. Today's focus is mainly going to be on the second and third bullets, which is freight system inventory and assessment and commodity flow analysis. So if you go to the next slide, please. We're going to talk about the North Carolina Freight Network designation. So on the next slide, you'll see a map. So in the original North Carolina statewide plan, freight plan was done in 2017. And you see here the blue, purple, and green lines represent the highway freight network that was designated based on that plan. A lot of work was put into that, a lot of analysis based on all the interstates that are in there, most of your major US routes, all high truck volume routes are in there. But as you see there are some areas where there's not coverage, and that may or may not be valid, but we were just wanted your input on the next slide. There's the third question is, are there any additions you would make to the North Carolina Highway Freight Network? And then Kip, you can go back to the slide and let people see you there. And then also we will send this out. This presentation will be posted, so you can zoom with a more high resolution map. We can zoom in and out. If you can't see that, if you want to zoom into your area, we'll be able to provide that as well. So, but just for today's discussion, is there anywhere that you noticed that should be added to the freight network, in your opinion?
So yeah, you can input that into the public input polling, and we'll take a look at what people say here in a minute. Any corridors that aren't highlighted? Okay, let's take a look. And I need to refresh here. So proper traffic counts, not sure yet, most likely improvements to I-40 and I-26 since I work for TDOT, and better connections, growth opportunities for passenger rail. Okay, yeah, thank you for the input. And yes, we were just focused on the highway here. We will be going through all modes in this presentation, but great points.
All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kip to talk about commodity flow overview.
Okay, let me turn my camera on. Okay, so understanding what commodities are being moved by all modes is really an important foundation for understanding freight movements in the state. So this is a graph of the commodity flows using freight analysis framework data from the Federal Highway Administration. So this is the latest freight data available. When we look at total freight moved in North Carolina, we see that in 2022, an estimated 747 million tons of commodities were moved, equaling over $1 trillion in value. And so when we project that out to 2050, we estimate that there's 1.14 billion tons of freight moved at a value of 1.86 trillion. So this represents a 53% growth by weight and 84% growth in value. So we do know that freight within North Carolina and nationally is projected to grow quite a bit between now and 2050, and we need to plan for that growth. The 2017 freight plan indicated that there were 594 million tons of freight moved at a value of $1 trillion in 2012. So we've seen that growth occur over the last 5 years, and it's expected to continue that growth rate through 2050. And then when you look at the different modes that are shown on the screen, you can see that trucks make up the vast majority of all the commodities that are moved in the state are by truck mode. So now let's look at what the top commodities are by weight and by value. And so first looking at the graph on the left, in 2017 and 2050, the largest commodities transported by weight were gravel, non-metal products, and wood products. Then when we look at the graph on the right, in 2017, the largest commodities transported by value are mixed freight, pharmaceuticals, and machinery. And these commodities moved are really very similar to what was reported 5 years ago. And I think there's not a lot of surprise in the commodities moved by weight in the gravel and non-metal products and wood products, and then the commodities moved by value representing mixed freight and pharmaceuticals are high value, low weight products. We then took a look at the commodities and how what their directional flow were. So when we look at commodity directional flow by weight, on the left, we see that the majority of the commodities were moved in-state at 44%. And then looking at the previous plan 5 years ago, in-state also made up the largest share at 34%. So in-state has maintained its highest directionality, and it even grew from 34 to 44%. When we look at the commodity directional flow by value on the right, we see that the through volume is expected to be the largest directional flow. Looking at the previous plan, through traffic was also the largest proportion at 39%. So now we want to take a look at who are the trading partners with North Carolina. So first focusing on domestic trading partners, 84% of the trading partners are east of the Mississippi River, and that's represented by the darker colors surrounding North Carolina, east of the Mississippi River. And then machinery from California and natural sands from Texas are the primary commodities by weight traded west of the Mississippi River. And you can see those two states highlighted. And then we'll look at the same domestic trading partners by value. And east of the Mississippi River, it dropped a little bit from the weight of 84% to 78% are trading partners east of the Mississippi River. And you can see those darker shaded states. And then electronics is the primary commodity that's traded with both Texas and California. So that leads us to the next survey question. So based on this information that I provided you, does that seem reasonable to what you know about freight movements in the state? So how confident are you in the reported data? Are you very confident, somewhat confident, neither confident nor not confident? Somewhat not confident, or not very confident. So you guys are the industry experts, and we're just trying to get a sense, does the data that I presented seem reasonable to you? So take a minute and answer that question if you would, please. And then I'll go on to the follow-up question, and then we'll look at the results. If your confidence level is low, can you add some feedback? Why do you feel like it's low? Okay, so let's look at the results. So how confident are you in the reported commodity flow volumes? 38% were somewhat confident, 31% neither confident nor not confident, 15% not at all confident, and then we've got 8% very confident, 8% not very confident, and that's all. So so somebody, for the people that put not very confident, somebody wrote not confident in the data. Can you give us some additional information on why you're not confident in the data? And you can either type it into the comment box in the survey. You could take yourself off mute, or you could add it to the chat in the GoToWebinar system. Let me refresh one more time just to make sure. Yeah, we just love to hear why you think, why you're not confident in the data. That'll help us moving forward. Okay, so somebody wrote the detail of freight content is hard to extract, and the commodity flow information is not aligned with sampling of companies. Ocean freight is the only commodity that has detailed classification. Truck and freight does not detail out mixed loads and DC movements nor prior movements of freight. Okay, well, like I said, we used a federal database for this information. If this person has a better source, I know that they said sometimes this information is just hard to extract out, but if there's a more detailed source of data that can be provided to the study team, we'd love to take a look at that. So let's go on to the next section. So this is looking at the economic role of freight. And so this slide shows the economic role that freight plays on the North Carolina economy. You can see that the average employment in 2019 for these freight modes totals nearly 165,000 employees, representing more than 8,000 establishments. So on average, this represents 69.3 tons per North Carolinian and 25,560 tons per business establishment. So this data, certainly shows that freight has an important part of North Carolina's economy. So now I'm going to turn it back over to John to talk about the highway component.
Thank you, Kip. So the first thing we'll talk about with this is 2019 average annual daily truck traffic, or AADTT. We chose 2019 for this study because the 2020 and 2021 volumes with the pandemic, we weren't really confident in those, and we talked to DOT traffic survey unit, and they recommended using 2019. So as you see here on this map, the darker and thicker the lines are, the higher the truck volumes are. Just to highlight those few green boxes, those are the 3 highest truck volumes in the state of North Carolina. The highest is I-85 just northeast of Charlotte and the 485 belt. The second highest was I-85 just west of the 485 belt. And then at 13,000 vehicles on I-40 and I-85 combined between Greensboro and the I-40 split was the third highest. And just when you look around the state, there were some other significant areas. I-77 north of Charlotte had over 10,000 vehicles, 10,000 trucks. I-95 got over quite a bit with 8,000. Some other areas you look at in the mountains, there was 7,500 trucks on I-26 south of Asheville. There were 4,000 on I-40 going through the mountains towards Tennessee. Then you go to the coast and you go in the Wilmington area. There's only 2,500 daily trucks on I-40 above Wilmington, but in close proximity to the port, US 74 had almost 5,000, and then US 17 east of Wilmington had 4,400, and that's mainly due to the Morehead City Port, as well as military operations nearby Camp Lejeune. So if you go to the next slide. This is just two graphs. We're talking about pavement conditions and we're talking about bridge conditions. So North Carolina rates these roads as either good or not good. And then we have some slides further down. We'll talk a little more detail about what goes into all these different conditions. But as you see, the interstate and state routes are all above 60% good, and the US and North Carolina highways are close to that. The graph on the right talks about bridge conditions. So the green means that it's not either structurally deficient or function obsolete. And before I go any further, I want to define those. A bridge that is considered structurally deficient may have restricted to, it's maybe restricted to light vehicles, close to traffic, or requires rehabilitation. And a functionally obsolete bridge doesn't have the lane widths, shoulder widths, or vertical clearance to adequately serve the demanding traffic, or it may not be able to handle occasional flooding. So those are your definitions, but as you see here, it's broken out by facility type. The vast majority of bridges in North Carolina are neither functionally obsolete or structurally deficient. You see the blue line at the bottom, there are some that fall into both categories. And we'll further down the presentation, we'll look at some maps and you can see where those are. Next slide, please. So I talked about highway pavement condition in the previous slide. This is rated poor, fair, or good. So DOT uses, the NCDOT uses factors such as pavement type, pavement age, rehab year, some other factors to determine the condition, and they give a score, and that it's either of these scales you see here. So this is just pavement conditions on the freight priority network. When you show the whole state, it's really, really hard to see. So we want to focus in and just look at the freight network. You see there's quite a bit of green. Most of the interstates are green. There are some red areas around Rocky Mount where I-95 and US 64 join. There's some in the Charlotte area, as well as NC 49 there northeast of Charlotte, and I-74 west of, or US 74 west of I-74. The good thing is, there's a lot of projects that are either ongoing or planned to help improve these pavement conditions. So that'll help address a lot of the issues. If you go to the next slide. So one thing to remember when you're looking at these pavement conditions is North Carolina has the second highest amount of state maintained roads outside of Texas. So there are limited resources to take care of all these roads. So the graph on the left shows the conditions of the freight network, priority freight network, and the graph on the right is all DOT maintained roads. So 72% of roads on the freight network are rated as good. That's pretty good, as well as 16% are fair. It's a little different on the all maintained roads, where it's 66% good and 22% fair. Both of them have 12% poor in the in both conditions, but I think this shows that DOT does focus their funds on major facilities that are included in the highway freight network, with the higher portion of the roads being rated as good. So the next slide talks about bridge conditions. So I told you a couple slides ago about functionally obsolete, structurally deficient, and then both. So the structurally deficient bridges here are shown on the map. So there's 22,200 bridges in all the state of North Carolina. 6% of those on the entire state are structurally deficient. What you see on this figure here, these are just the ones on the highway freight network. 3% of all bridges on the freight network are considered structurally deficient. There's some clusters there around the Greensboro, Winston-Salem area, as well as on I-40, pretty much all from Statesville towards Asheville and then through the mountains of Tennessee. As you see, there's not a lot on the east side of the state, which is good with all the bridges they have there. If you go to the next slide, this is bridges that are considered functionally obsolete. Remember, those are the ones that don't have the correct laneage, shoulder width, or they might flood to handle the traffic. So as you see on there, it's quite a bit more. 18% of bridges in all of North Carolina are considered functionally obsolete. 16% of bridges on the highway freight network are functionally obsolete. There are quite a bit on some of the corridors, such as I-95 and I-26, and there are projects going on or scheduled to fix those. There's some in the Charlotte metro area, as well as the Raleigh, and there's projects I know to fix those as well. So we are making efforts to repair the aging infrastructure throughout the state. And then the next slide shows bridges that are considered both, and those are the ones you really don't want to be on, truthfully, because they're both categories. You see, there's not a lot there. That is good. I know the I-40 ones, and just to say, the last time these were rated was also 2019. So these are being rated by DOT every couple of years. They grade these in different portions of the state. So you go to the next slide. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about freight network performance. What you're looking at here is the average truck speeds in North Carolina, and this comes from the National Performance Management Research Data Set, NPMRDS, if you've ever heard of that. From a statewide standpoint, there's quite a bit of green. The mountains are slower, the metro areas are slower. You'd expect that. If you look up in the northwest corner, the Boone area, it gets pretty slow through there, as well as the Wilmington area with the military bases and the port. This is for the AM. So if you go to the next slide, we zoom in more to the metro areas. The triad, you see I-40 business has low speeds through there, as well as through the High Point area. Winston-Salem has some areas as well. You go over to Charlotte, there's quite a bit of lower speeds, except for the interstates all perform fairly well, but a lot of the secondary roads, or the U.S. highways and those do have lower truck speeds, as well as when we look at Raleigh, US 70, US 1. If you live in Raleigh, it's expected much slower speeds with the congestion, but an I-40 does perform pretty well in the AM. If you go to the next slide, we're going to look at PM statewide. It's a similar story as to the AM. There's actually a little bit more congestion and slower speeds in the PM as you would expect. That's typically the case for all traffic volumes. We will go down to the next slide and zoom into the metro areas. It's a very similar story. Greensboro, there's same areas, more red. Charlotte's even worse, and some of the interstates start to break down in Charlotte in the PM peak hour, as well as Raleigh. You see I-40 south of Raleigh breaks down, as well as I-40 through the Research Triangle area. And then you get to US 15 501, Durham to Chapel Hill, US 1, US 70. Those are all much lower speeds in the PM. So if you go to the next slide, we're going to shift gears again now and talk about truck crashes. So we were going to show just the truck crashes on the highway freight network initially, but we want to show you this entire map. This is all truck crashes from 2015 to 2019 in the state of North Carolina. They're clustered mainly along the interstate corridor, as well as some of the metropolitan areas. There's over 46,000 truck crashes in this time period. The good thing is, from the previous plan, looked at 2011 to 2015, and there were 49,000 truck crashes. So that's a 5% reduction from the previous plan. Next slide. So this is looking at the truck crashes by interstate, by roadway class. As you would expect, a third of the crashes happen on the interstate facilities, and that is the highest. Then you go down, and the next highest is not US routes, it is local streets, and that's your last mile trips going to and from your warehouses probably. Then US routes, NC routes, state routes, and then public areas, that's your rest stops. And then the unknown is typically a parking area, such as a private parking area, like a Walmart parking area or other private parking lots. So that's an average of 9,300 truck crashes per year, and that's 25 truck crashes per day. It's quite a bit. If you're curious, when you looked in 2020, the truck crashes did go down to 8,900 truck crashes as opposed to the 9,300. So the less traffic on the roads did create less traffic for trucks as well. If you go to the next slide. So this is also looking at truck crashes by severity and type. On the left, you'll see the vast majority were property damage only, which is very good. However, 1% of all truck crashes did result in fatality, and then possible injury was next, and then incapacitating injury. On the right shows the truck crashes by type. Sideswipe was by far the highest. The next highest was rear end crashes, followed by followed by angle, ran off road, and then other. Luckily, there were not a bunch of there were only 300 head-on truck crashes, and very minimum 146 that involved bicycle and pedestrians. So the next slide. This looks at the crashes just a little bit different angle. When you look at that total statewide map, obviously the metro areas have the most. Then when you look at about truck crashes per 100 miles of laneage, it tells a little bit of a different story. So when you do that, your highest truck crash counties are Catawba, Graham, and Hertford County, and your lowest is Yadkin, Wake, and Yancey. So most of your metro areas, minus Wake, are still in the higher categories. Mecklenburg still has quite a few. But when you look at it based on the mileage, you'll see the western part of the state, particularly in the southwest, and then the areas are much higher, and then around the port with Brunswick County, and then also on the eastern side of the state, on US 64, US 264, and I-17 do have higher crash rates. And if you go to the next slide, we have our next survey question. And Kip, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so John went through, bridge conditions, and pavement, and he talked about traffic, level of service, and he talked about safety. And so, thinking about those things, we want you to select your top 3 freight highway challenges. And so we've listed a number of challenges there on the left with a brief definition in parentheses. So if you could go into the publicinput.com and identify your top 3 challenges, that would be helpful. We'll give it a minute for people to fill that out.
I'm sorry. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. So for our first question, while people are answering that one, so why not use the 2020 AADTT? The section of I-40 west of Asheville has 7,500 AADTT in 2020 based on the NCDOT AADTA interactive map. I think that is more realistic. It is probably higher now.
John, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we just chose 2020 because we thought that reflected the
Or 2019.
Excuse me, sorry, 2019 reasonable traffic trends, and that was also in agreement with the traffic NCDOT traffic unit as well that collects all the traffic counts. I mean, we did look at some other areas as well, like the crashes went down in 2020. We felt like we should use the same base year when looking at all of these areas.
Yeah, I think, a lot of anomalies are going on during COVID. Certainly less personal travel we saw in 2020, but probably more truck trips as we saw a lot more e-commerce and shipments going on. And so we did also see a rise in crashes and more severe crashes also. And I'm talking about nationally. I'm giving a perspective since we didn't look at 2020. Yeah, I guess we just made a group decision to stay away from 2020 data right now. Let's take a look at the survey results. And I'll refresh. Were there other questions, Nastasha?
Yes, so I have about 5 more survey questions.
Oh, okay. John, you're up to bat.
All right, so the next question is, what is the cost to bring the bridges up to standard use for the freight network?
I do not have that answer. That's something we will look at further as we go to the plans. This is more giving you an existing conditions analysis. So we're working on looking at the STIP and what it addresses, and then try to figure out if there's additional things that freight needs that is not included in the STIP. So information like that's further to come, and we'll discuss sort of the next steps at the end of this presentation.
All right, thank you. Next question. This is on performance. Great performance picture. Do you have a picture during working hours, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.?
We can get that data. We have all the data from National NPM RDS. We just chose to show the peak hour. Just looking at that. If you're interested, we can produce maps and share it with you. It's in it all comes in a shapefile format. So I don't know, Nastasha, if we would want to have the best way to share that, but we can figure that out and work with you.
Yeah, let's discuss how to do that offline. So the next question is on freight crashes. What portion are side swipes, and what is the average time the freight corridor is constrained by the crash?
So the side swipes were, it was 15,000 of the trip, so that is roughly a third. In my complicated math there, I do not have the information about the average delay time for a truck crash. Truthfully, I'm not sure who keeps that information. I don't know if the Highway Patrol does that or not, but we could look into that. Do you know, Kip?
A lot of times your traffic management center will keep that. You know, I'm not sure about, you know, like in the Charlotte area if they collect that information, but it's significant. And, you know, when we write up the safety portion, we'll talk about the impact of, you know, truck crashes, not only from a safety standpoint, but then secondarily from a operation standpoint.
And anytime you would like to know any crash data, you can also go to our Drive and See database, and you can make a request through our Drive and See. It does record all traffic crashes that have happened currently and in the past. They can pull that information and let you know specifically for each individual crash. If it did happen on a DOT route and the road had to be closed, they can let you know for how long those particular ones are closed as well, and what for specific routes that you're looking for. The next question is, how many of the truck crashes were the trucker's responsibility versus the car personal vehicle being at fault?
So that information comes from the actual crash report, and when we requested this information from the traffic safety unit, they just sent us the total number of crashes and then the type. That information is available, just we don't have it, but Sasha, I don't know if that type of information is also found the website you listed or not. I'm not sure.
No, that is not found on that website. That information would have to be requested from the traffic survey unit as well. All right, so next and last question that I have. Hello, I can't seem to access or see where to input the answers to the survey questions. So to input any answers for the survey questions, you want to go to the chat function. We have the website for www.publicinput.com/freight, or you can text freight to 984-205-6615. And that will allow you to put the information in to answer the public input. Or you can always drop your information into the chat function or the question section as well. Oh, I'm sorry. I do have one more. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
That just came in. All right.
No,
so
the questions are good.
Do you track the frequency and the duration of impacts to the freight network from truck crashes? I perceive the accidents on I-40 and the gorge seem to be frequent and have significant impact delays.
So I don't have the frequency with the data that was sent to us. I'm sure they have it. Now you can look at the percentage of crashes on, like they do have total crashes and they send us truck crashes, so we could get a percentage. And like Kip said earlier, some of the traffic management centers might have the delay information, but we do not have that as part of this study.
All right, that is the last question that I have. Thanks, guys.
Okay, well, thanks for your questions. This helps us understand what's important to you all. So the survey question was, please select your top 3 freight highway challenges in North Carolina. So congestion, you can see got the most votes, then safety, and then truck parking. So that's helpful. I think the congestion and safety were 1 and 2 at our meeting on Tuesday that was just like this. Truck parking was, let's see, about 4th or 5th down from Tuesday. So it's risen up in importance. And maybe that could be just the people that we have on the call. And so that's a great transition to our next section on truck parking. A truck parking study was done in the 2017 plan 5 years ago, and so it's being updated here also. And so it'll be laid out in this format. We are putting together kind of a truck parking advisory group that we'd like to meet twice on to get some feedback on our truck parking analysis. So if you're interested in truck parking, and it sounds like a lot of you are from your responses, we'd love for you to participate on this truck parking advisory group. So if you could put your name in the chat and just say interested in truck parking advisory group or TPAG, then we'll reach out to you. We're getting ready to set up a meeting in the next couple of weeks to have our, probably early June, have our first meeting, and then late June have the second meeting. And you guys are the experts, so we'd love to have you join us. And then so we'll be updating the supply and the demand and the analysis in this update. Just kind of showing you, we're just getting started, but we thought we would show you some of the information from the previous plan. So you can see that in 2017, there were 167 parking locations representing 4,800 spaces. And you can see how those are distributed throughout the state. Approximately 59% of the parking locations are private and 41% are public. However, when you look at actual parking spaces, 85% of them are privately run. And then the truck parking utilization that was done indicated that the facilities along these corridors of I-26, I-77, I-85, and I-95 are the ones that have the most need at capacity. And then truck demand is projected to increase, just like truck traffic is projected to increase, as I showed you earlier in the commodity flow information. So looking at it just through a different lens, looking at the parking facilities by type, there's 73 private facilities, 51 public rest areas, 25 Walmart stores, 18 waste stations, for a total of 167 total truck parking facilities representing 4,800 spaces. And then there was actually an update done in 2020, and between 2017 and 2020, 14 new parking locations were added for an additional 1,300 spaces. So primarily Pilot and Flying J added the most capacity in the state, 9 new locations, followed by Love's with 4 new locations and the TA Greensboro new location. So our survey question is, are there any new truck parking locations that have come online? We know about the new ones in 2020, so really, have there been any that you all know about in the last couple of years? And if so, where are they? We'd love to have that information. So if you can type that into the survey question, and then the question that goes with that is the next one: what and where are truck parking needs and challenges? So in addition to the location and of new parking locations and spaces, what are the needs and challenges in general for truck parking? So I'll give you guys 30 seconds to answer that question, and then we'll go over and take a look at what your responses are. Okay, so far, are there any new truck parking locations that have come online since the 2017 plan? If so, where are they located? So 17% said yes. Parking for, and then the challenges are parking for driver rests that have full service for driver recovery, service, fuel, food, and safety of the trucker and the public. And low, I guess that could be, are there any challenges? So for the people that said yes, we'd love to know where those are to help us track that down. Could you put that in the chat for Nastasia?
And I do have one question so far. So
Uh-huh.
this one is on the truck parking. Any sense of value for more full service parking like Love's versus Interstate parking? Why the strong opposition on parking on exit ramps off the interstate?
Well, I'll start with the last part. I mean, really the parking on the exit ramps is for safety reasons. That's not what the general public is anticipating when they're exiting the highway. And we want to reserve those shoulders for disabled cars and actually quickly get them off of the shoulder as quick as possible. But that's more from a safety standpoint. And then the first part is, yeah, I mean, the private sector provides a great need on providing truck parking. I think the point being that we want to make sure that there are truck parking for the time restrictions that are out there for truckers. And we definitely want them to have safety, lighting, and amenities, restrooms, showers, food. So I think that the private sector provides a great opportunity to fill that need. Okay. And then again, if the people that said they know of truck parking, if you could put that in the chat, that would be helpful. But let's go ahead and move on.
We do have one that is being built. There's a new Love's facility being built off of Highway 52, just north of Winston-Salem.
Okay, great. Thank you for that information. We'll check that out. I appreciate that. Okay, you get to hear a new speaker. So Jimmy, I think you're up for North Carolina Rail.
Well, good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all, and it does sound like we have a lot of interest in trucks today. So I hope I don't spoil it with a bit of a discussion on rail. But the North Carolina freight plan does include all the modes, and rail is a key and important component of the statewide freight plan. Currently, the North Carolina DOT is updating all the maps, all the freight plan maps. And as you can see in front of you, this is the updated freight rail network. And some of the interesting facts that are related to rail in North Carolina is that it has 2 Class 1 providers in the state. As you see in light blue is the CSX railroad network in North Carolina, and you can see it's pretty broad and expansive, connecting also to the port of Wilmington and over to several of the inland terminals that we'll discuss in a little bit. You see the Norfolk Southern, the other Class 1 in the state, in light green, and you can see how the two interact in different areas of the state. Also, you have the North Carolina Railroad Company coming from the Morehead City Port up through the Raleigh, Greensboro, and Charlotte areas. And then many of the short lines in the state. And North Carolina has 26 short line railroads all across the state. And you see those in gray, helping to connect some of those Class 1s to some of the manufacturing and end users and distribution. Also, we have the highway network shown in yellow, so you can kind of see some of the overlap and where it's a lot of interaction with the highway goes, and then you see this other states are in light gray. So next slide, please. And while he's switching slides, just wanted to let y'all know, North Carolina has rail in 86 out of the 100 counties in the state. So 86% of the counties have rail activity currently servicing various freight industries and clients. As you see on the screen here, one of the things that that we looked into with regards to the rail is that North Carolina is currently in finalizing and in draft final their 2021 state rail plan. And in this rail plan, it looks at both freight and passenger rail. Now we're just focusing on the freight elements here in the rail components of this plan. But when this other plan comes out, you'll be able to I saw a question earlier related to how to better incorporate passenger rail into the state. A lot of those answers will be in this other study. So be looking out for that as it comes out in the near future. Some of the key things that we pulled from that plan, though, that are coming forward are some of the goals and objectives. And as you see here, provide access to freight rail users is one of the top goals, to improve rail safety, and we'll talk a little bit about safety in these slides ahead. Enhance the resiliency of rail infrastructure, so make sure that there is capability to withstand natural man-made disasters, to be prepared for unforeseen events, and to make sure that the rail lines can keep business moving and keep products moving on their corridors. To look at it from a corridor level approach to see how freight movement benefits the entire freight network. How does rail better benefit the entire network? And also to realize economic opportunities by supporting existing and potential rail served markets, industries, and businesses. So it's a great economic opportunity to continue to expand and support rail services in the state. Next slide, please. So I wanted to go over a few intermodal rail terminals, and this is for those that aren't aware what an intermodal terminal is. Intermodal means that that you have a container or box that is can be moved from truck to ship to train across modes, so intermodal. These terminals here are moving off of a train onto a truck or vice versa. And the one that you see in the slide pictured in front of you is the Caroline Connector Intermodal Terminal in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. And this was recently opened in 2021. It's a 330-acre facility. It is estimated that this will eliminate over 16 million truck miles each year. It is a CSX served facility, so one of those Class 1 rail providers we talked about. And the facility's location is convenient. It's only 5 miles from I-95 and 60 miles northeast of Raleigh, or one of the major consumption markets. Sometimes it's referred to as the Triangle region of the state. This site has 3 fully automated cranes with a lift capacity of 110 containers per year, and they all are electric zero emission cranes. You see those in the bottom picture on your slide there, and it's a completely automated terminal, so provides quick and efficient movement of containers from rail to truck and vice versa. This also provides what is called the X-Gate app, which minimizes truck idle times, helps quickly find your load and get in and get out of the facility without having to have trucks idling or having to find truck parking while waiting for their load. Next slide. So there's a bit of delay on the slide transfers, but the next slide is the North Carolina Greensboro terminal, which is served by Norfolk Southern. It's a 50-acre facility. It does provide top lift and bottom lift capabilities with the equipment they have on the facility. This is a 24-hour-a-day service, and it's also conveniently located near the I-85 interstate. And in fact, the container yard is just adjacent to the ramp there at I-85. And also, it serves some of the primary manufacturing markets for the state, including furniture production, lumber and refined lumbers, paper products, chemicals, and tobacco. products. So these are just two examples of the intermodal facilities that the state currently has. The next slide, please. So one of the primary goals of the state rail plan is to provide access to freight rail users, and that remains a priority, as you can see in some of the goals and objectives that were listed previously in the upcoming rail plan. So that is also a focus area here for the freight plan. To improve the road and rail connections at freight rail facilities and at the port terminals. Look at these intermodal terminals and transload facilities, and have the possibility of more cargo to be moved, by rail with greater efficiency. And that, as you saw some of the previous slides that Kip showed, with the growth, by 2045 in truck traffic, that's probably not completely sustainable by interstates and highways alone. Alternative movements on intermodal rail to key distribution centers or to interland markets where truck drivers can have shorter hauls to the end user. These are things that need to be focused on and need to continue to be a priority. Also looking at short line access from Class 1 railroads to manufacturing and end users needs to remain a focus. Expand and improve on-dock rail service. So, continue to support the intermodal connections at the state ports terminals, and to grow those capabilities. One example in 2017, Port of Wilmington has commenced the Queen City Express, and this is just a great example of offering intermodal services to the Charlotte area, via CSX. Another freight rail investment program is the Piedmont Atlantic Intermodal Rail Service, called PARS program, and this is just also improving safety and access to intermodal rail services across the state, and also just moving cargo to the inland ports, getting it off the docks quicker, providing that capacity for growth at the port terminals, and allowing the trains to get closer to the end user markets. Next slide, Kip. So I mentioned that we would talk a little bit about rail safety, and we looked back all the way through the previous plan to 2012 through 2021 to show that the rail safety is a priority, and that it is in a positive direction right now. Since 2018, total accidents has dropped from over 60 down to steady at 40 total accidents. Fatalities has also dropped since 2018, and then injuries has had a significant drop. As you can see, if you're going all the way back to the middle of the previous plan in 2015, injuries have had a significant drop in or trending downward. So it is a great report to say mortality rates have improved by 75%, and that overall safety is a priority and will remain a priority, looking at things like better warning devices, rehabilitation of older lines and older railways, and adoption of channelization. So the state is looking at priority funding sources and Section 130 programs, and also the STI and the STIP programs to have specific projects related to safety, and continue to focus on that. Next slide, please. So You know, it has to remain a priority to enhance the resiliency of rail infrastructure. As we've seen major storm events in recent decades, you know, rail has to be able to bounce back quickly, to be able to provide a network of that can quickly get markets back up to speed, be able to move freight and goods to markets, so that you don't have issues, long-term issues in supply chain. So having a resilient program by reestablishment of like the S line in the state, and also to have a ready and prepared military program like the StracNet system for military facilities is just critical, and that will be a component of this plan, and it's actually a requirement to have, you know, to have resiliency incorporated into the planning efforts. So all of the projects that do come forth for freight related to rail will have both safety and resiliency incorporated into it. Also looking at it from a corridor level approach. We want to look at how can we complement the major highway improvements. How can they look at, and the rail plan does this as well, looking at the passenger side of how they can help reduce this growth in the system. So the rail plan will consider how we can complement high ridership, high freight, daily truck movements in key corridors, and how can they be potentially moved by rail. And then also helping to advance the Southeast Corridor by aligning major cities on the East Coast with better and high performance rail services. So these are all things that are being looked at and incorporated into the rail component. Next slide, please. And while we're waiting for the slide to move, you know, you may notice that there hasn't been a focus on tonnage moved by rail and what have you. And we are currently analyzing waybill data to provide that, and it will be provided in future iterations in the final plan. So you will have, you know, the tonnages and the total TEUs moved by rail throughout the state in the final part of this plan. So looking at the economic opportunities that come. So rail promotes and supports compatible uses like mega sites, rail serve sites, example like Global Transpark, or called GDP, improvements to these facilities. Also looking at acquiring and preserving underutilized freight rail corridors, making sure that those corridors that may be needed in the future are, you know, included and focused on, and don't end up becoming in disrepair or non-use future. Leveraging public-private partnerships. So talking, you know, with class 1 investments and short line investments, and just finding how the you know, these improvements can be done to support the state overall. And then we do have a survey question, Kip.
Yeah, so with Jimmy's overview of the rail profile, we'd just like to ask you which of the following needs or challenges are most important to you: the availability of direct rail service, the cost of railroad service, infrastructure needs, intermodal bulk and container transfer facilities, multimodal public and private partnerships, or something else that you might type into the public input. So yeah, based on Jimmy's overview and your understanding of rail, let us know what you think is most important for us to focus on. I will give everyone some time to fill out that question.
All right, and we have some comments and questions in the chat, so I'll read through those while people are filling it out. So the first comment, traveling southbound on I-85 yesterday, I observed 8 tractor trailers parked on northbound I-85 on ramp at exit 79. CSX Carolina Connector is an awesome facility. Need more like this in North Carolina. What's the next? Short line access to Class 1 network should be a priority, a high priority. And then availability and cost. And then, sorry, scroll back up to my questions now that I did the comments. So the first question, how do we get more than one rail company to service key transportation centers? For instance, looks like on Norfolk Southern service, Morehead City, why not Norfolk Southern, CSX, and Canada Rail all service?
That last one was a statement or a question?
The last one was a question. You want me to read it again?
Yeah, read it one more time, please. I was writing down all those.
Okay, I'll read it again. How do we get more than one rail company to service key transportation centers, such as Norfolk Southern service to Morehead City? Why not have it Norfolk Southern, CSX, and Canada Rail?
And that's a really good question. I can only answer it from previous experience, but we'll definitely take it into consideration as we continue to reach out to stakeholders. We are, interviewing the different rail lines throughout the state that are willing to speak with us, and also speaking directly and working directly with the port, North Carolina State Port Authority, which I'm sure could provide some good insight into that. Railroads are historically, very challenging to negotiate with, not because they don't want to, but because they run as a business. They are private businesses. But this is definitely something we will look into. In other states I've worked in Texas, where they had multiple rail lines coming into one area or one arena, like in Houston, they developed a what was called the Port Terminal Rail Association, where they they agreed to interchange and use each other's tracks, which is one way that can occur. Now, can it occur in North Carolina? I can't answer that question, but we will definitely look into that question more as we focus on the development of this rail profile and rail information. So thank you for that.
All right, so I have another question. It's a two-part question, so I'll just read the first question first, and then I'll let you answer, and then I'll answer the next one. So the question is, what are the major reasons for the great reductions in mortality?
I don't know the reasons yet. We basically, and we can go back to that slide if you would like to show it, but basically this data is, was just basically pulled from the safety program in the state that shows the total numbers per year. We can look into it a little bit more and get some more specifics why that is dropping. But I do know that both state DOTs and railroads themselves make rail safety a high priority. Warning systems and devices, constantly improving crossings at grade, removing at grade crossings with overpasses or bridges is another way, and also just education. Many states provide training and education both for the rail lines and the users of those rail lines, and for at the local level in schools with teaching children and folks that the safety of properly approaching crossings and taking railroads serious. So I can't say for certain, but there has been a lot of funding through Section 130 grants and other types of grant programs to help educate those and also improve crossings. That would be my initial answer, but we'll definitely have that more of a look into that as we write up those sections.
And the next part of the question is, what portion of rail deaths are folks walking on the rail versus crossing related?
So I'll have to go back into our data and dive into the specifics and see if it goes that far. You know, I don't know the exact answer. Basically, ours was broken down by fatalities and injuries and didn't say, you know, specifically where those occurred. So we can try and look at the data and see how specific it gets. Again, this is a statewide rail plan, so we're providing information at a higher level, not getting down into those micro reasons. Those usually happen at the district level when they're actually implementing projects and implementing programs to support like safety and what have you. But we'll certainly see if our data can provide a little bit more information for you.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Let's take a look at the question results. Need to refresh. Okay. For rail, which of the following needs or challenges are most important to you? So availability of direct rail service was number one at 56%. And then you can see infrastructure needs, number two, and then intermodal bulk and container transfer and other. Any thoughts on that, Jimmy, on how the survey results turned out?
No, that's really good and really good information that we can put forward as we start to do the project analysis. And that's the whole point of this, is to kind of get the input from the industry so we know that we're looking at the right things. You know, availability of rail service is obviously a major need, as you can hear from this response here. Infrastructure, you know, funding those projects that will provide better rail service and safer rail service, and then you know, intermodal bulk and container transfer facilities. You know, you can see the growth in freight throughout the state. The more that we invest in these intermodal facilities, the more that we can transfer some of the burden that is occurring on the highway to other modes. And so I think that's a really good thing for the state to be looking at and investing in.
Yeah, and then the comment goes back to, I think, a previous question about more rail options. So somebody wrote multiple railroad companies into or out of the ports today. They are constrained by having only either Norfolk Southern or CSX. We need to have robust options and strong intermodal.
Yeah, and that is definitely, you know, something that we'll look into as we have more conversations with the port and the rail companies. It definitely is not uncommon comment. That is definitely, you hear that a lot, because it means they can have more competitive rate structures. They can have, you know, more options for the actual shippers to go into different markets. So yeah, that is definitely something that we hear a lot.
Okay, thanks for the rail discussion, Jimmy. Let's talk about air cargo within the state now. So we know that there's 17 airports that transport air cargo to, from, and through North Carolina. The three major airports are the Charlotte, Douglas, Raleigh-Durham, and Piedmont Triad International Airports. They move 99% of the air cargo in North Carolina. So these three main airports, plus other key airports in the state, are part of the Freight Priority Network and are therefore eligible for federal funds. Air cargoes represents a little under 1% of North Carolina's total freight movement. And so when we look at this slide here, air cargo trends are important to analyze to see what are the future air cargo and air cargo demand is expected to, what it's expected to be in the future. So both charts use the same FAF data that I talked to you about with the commodity flows. The chart on the left shows the value and tonnage of the air cargo moved in 2017, and the projections for the low and high growth scenarios in 2050. So this information, shows air cargo about doubling from 2017 to 2050 in both value and tonnage. And this lines up with the previous plan, which projected out to 2045. So 2050 has increased a little bit more. The graph on the right breaks this down further and shows the inbound and outbound and the combined inbound and outbound projections for 2017 and 2050 for the low growth and high growth scenarios. And this follows the same trend of tons roughly doubling from 2017 to 2050 that we previously showed you. So looking at the entire state, these are the top commodities transported by air in terms of tonnage and value in 2017 from that same FAF data, lining up with the top commodities moved by value that I talked about earlier. Pharmaceuticals is in the top 5 commodities. And this lines up with North Carolina industries as a major pharmaceutical companies such as LabCorp that operates out of the Burlington airport. And then machinery, electronics, pharmaceuticals, plastics, rubber, we're all in the top 5 for both commodity and tonnage and value. And the top commodities for value and tonnage are similar to the previous plan, but may have changed their rankings slightly. So now we want to understand the commodities that are traveling to and from North Carolina, and we look at the top trading partners. So North Carolina airports trade with 7 domestic destinations. Memphis has 30% of the tonnage for imports and exports, and that makes sense because it's a FedEx hub. And then Louisville consists of 13% of the imports and exports tonnage, and it is a UPS hub. So FedEx and UPS are located at the 3 major airports in the state, and FedEx and UPS are also the top 2 air cargo carriers in North Carolina airports, carrying 71% of all air cargo. These numbers are consistent with the previous plan. And then there's 3 international airport destinations in the top 10 trading partners, including London, Munich, and Frankfurt. These cargo shipments are likely belly cargo, and this is consistent with the lower percentages of tons of cargo that goes to and from these international destinations. So from an air cargo standpoint, what are the following air cargo needs or challenges that are most important to you? So we've got a list there: availability of service, cost of service, timeliness of service, improving the air cargo infrastructure, adding more capacity, multimodal connectivity between the airport and rail, ports or highways, that multimodal aspect, or something else. So we'll give everyone a few minutes to fill out the survey there, and then let's take a look at that. Nastasha, were there any questions in the chat related to air cargo?
We do not have any questions at this time.
Okay. So let me refresh. Get all the latest questions. A few people worked ahead, which is fine. It tells me what kind of person they were, like in high school. They like to work ahead. For aviation, which of the following needs or challenges are most important to you? So 78% said the multimodal connectivity between the airports and all the other modes. So yeah, that's a trend that we're seeing in other states too, increased multimodal connectivity. So that's not surprising to see. And then just availability of air cargo service. So we talked about how 99% of air cargo are at those 3 airports. So maybe some availability of air cargo at the other airports around the state would be helpful. and then the cost of air cargo service. So excellent. Thanks for the feedback there. Let's move on to ports now.
All right, Kip, appreciate it and thank you. And I'm going to start secretly putting questions into your slides since nobody had any airport questions. So looking at the North Carolina ports, you know, in North Carolina, you have a state port authority, which they refer to as the North Carolina State Port Authority, or NC Ports. And in this freight plan, we'll have a ports profile and a critical area related to the statewide waterborne and inland port system. So looking at the map above here, you see the two major waterborne facilities in the state, Morehead City and then Wilmington. And to the far right bottom part, you see it says M95, and for those of you that don't know what that is, that's the Maritime Administration, or USDOT's federal intercoastal waterway marine highway. So just like you have I-95, you have M95, and that provides opportunities for funding and what have you from the federal level. Also, the Port Authority operates the Charlotte Inland Port, which you can see shown with the little orange rail icon over near the city of Charlotte. And then we're also showing the three primary freight airports on this map, along with the major rail network, freight rail network throughout the state. So next slide, please. So I want to kind of give you just a brief overview. The North Carolina Ports Authority in 2021 updated their strategic plan, including their core values and core pillars. The core values are safety, people, integrity, and service. And since they operate like a business, they hold these values very high and very important to what they do to provide freight and multimodal service to their clients and to their tenants. Looking at their core pillars, they plan for growth of their cargo volumes. They want to expand global coverage of vessel services. They want to engage and support statewide economic development, so very important to them. And then also they want to develop the talent pipeline, so being able to get highly skilled and engaged workforce. Next slide, please. I want to just give you a brief overview of the terminals in North Carolina. Some of the key advantages to the Port of Wilmington: the port terminal provides container service. It provides bulk and break bulk services to its clients. It's a 284-acre facility. It has a 42-foot deep navigation channel that can be increased during tidal fluctuations of upwards of 4 feet. They accommodate 1,200 foot in length and 158 foot wide vessels, which are considered post-Panamax or post-Panamax 2, that some of the largest vessels transiting the world today can come into the port. They have over 1 million square feet of covered storage existing. They have 125 acres of open storage. They have 7 container cranes, which are called ship-to-shore or gantry cranes. You can see them in the picture there, the blue ones there. And they have these cranes can reach as far across as upwards of 200 feet, 230 feet across vessels. So these are massive cranes that can reach those containers off of those vessels. They have 760 reefer plugs, and that means those are containers or trucks that are climate controlled. They have food, kindred products on them, so they have to remain chilled like your refrigerator. And then they have on-dock rail and intermodal services on this terminal, as well as access from CSX directly to the facility. And also, they're an employee-operated terminal from North Carolina Port Authority employees. Kip, next slide. So the other port is the Port of Morehead City, and this port terminal is bulk, break bulk, and ro-ro, and ro-ro is roll on, roll off. So that means that, you know, cargo that can drive on either on a trailer, a chassis, or maybe it's equipment like you know, bulldozers or excavators, or maybe it's actually you know, buses, trucks, and cars. So yeah, this is an interesting type of cargo. And then they also provide bulk and break bulk on a 120-acre terminal. They have a second terminal as well that's in development, Radio Island Terminal. It's 150 acres, and you can see that to the upper left there with some tanks, liquid bulk facilities on it. And then they also have a 45-foot deep channel coming into the port. So they're already a deep port, and they have 9 berths with over 5,366 linear feet of bulkhead and wharf frontage. They have, again, another port with 1 million square feet of covered storage space. They have rail service from Norfolk Southern. They have on-dock rail opportunities to be able to quickly transfer cargo onto rail. They also have about 700 miles, within 700 miles of 70% of the U.S. industrial base. So very well and strategically located facilities in the state of North Carolina. Next slide, please. So the inland facility that the port provides the state is a 20-acre terminal. It's called the Charlotte Inland Port. It accommodates about 2,000 grounded or wheeled containers, and serves as a staging area for empties and loaded containers with 24 hours access. And they are providing service for the I-85, excuse me, and I-77 corridors in the state. And on the facility, they have a maintenance shop which can provide repairs to containers, to truck chassis, and other repair needs. And it also provides and shortens the first and last mile of transit, so that it gives that intermodal service we described earlier in the rail section. Next slide. So the Queen City Express, you know, coming out of the Port of Wilmington into Charlotte, the CSX intermodal service, and you know, some of the key advantages here is that it's just lowering the overall transportation costs, both rail and truck. It shortens the direct rail service to that greater Charlotte region, and also, you know, providing closer access to, you know, the 70% of the U.S. market that we talked about earlier. It reduces emissions. You know, moving by rail is environmentally reducing carbon emissions of sometimes it's upward of 200 trucks, depending on the size of the train. So also it reduces the dwell times by getting containers off the port quickly with a quick and flexible staging and easy access. So next slide, please. The Wilmington Midwest Express, or CCX, which was mentioned by one of the folks that are watching today, it provides immediate discharge to intermodal on-dock rail facilities at the port. It gets that transit time to 5 days into Chicago, 7 and into Ohio, 7 days into St. Louis, and on the export side, you're getting 4 days from Chicago in Ohio area to 6 days from St. Louis. So able to really get into those major hinterlands of the U.S. This side of the Mississippi. So it provides competitive rates, efficient on-port operations, no dwell times, and it's considered the fastest ship-to-rail service on the East Coast of the United States. So a lot of bragging rights with this, and a lot of people have commented what a great service this is as we've been doing this study. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give a brief overview of some of the commodity movements from the ports. Import commodities by container. This is the intermodal services. You can see the furniture and home furnishing goods at 21%. Auto and auto parts make up 14% of the overall. You got 13 in machinery goods, consumer goods, like apparel and textiles. You can see if you combine those two together, it's 24%. So a lot of access to retail and those markets coming into the state through the ports. The ports are exporting 49% of their exports are wood. Apparel and textiles makes up 18%, and then you have again chemical products and then agricultural products making up 14 and 11%. Looking at the number of containers, which is represented in TEUs, that means 20-foot equivalent units, by the way, and that's how they measure containers in the industry. There's imported over 150,000 in fiscal year 21, and exported 145,000, almost 146,000 TEUs. So pretty even on the import-export numbers of TEUs. The total TEUs are close to 300,000 in 2020, 2021. And just for reference purposes, in November of 2019, the terminal throughput and general cargo tonnage provided was close to 395,000. And the port, has mentioned that they feel like they're on track with quite a bit of growth in 2021. So, next slide, please. So we're looking at the bulk and break bulk commodities, imports and exports, and this is represented in metric tons. Imports and break bulk and bulk commodities, the top imports were chemicals and fertilizers and plastic goods. You had gravel, stone, asphalt at 20%, metal and metal products representing 18%, and then again, more of those wood products and wood grains and wood pulp at 10%. The exports side of the equation in bulk, chemical products and plastic products at 41%, and then 30% wood and wood pulp, 21% gravel and stone. So that, is making up the majority of the products that are being exported by the state. Tonnage wise, the import tons are 3,422,000 tons in fiscal year 21, and export tonnage was around 228,000 export tons, with the total around 3.6 million tons in the state. Next slide.
Okay, so lots of good information on the ports from Jimmy. So based on that and your understanding of the ports, what do you think are the needs or challenges most important to North Carolina? So as you're filling that out, Nastasia, are there any questions that have come in for Jimmy?
There's only been one comment added to the chat, and that was for Greer, South Carolina Inland Port should be considered in the study.
Yeah, and I appreciate that comment. I meant to state something at the beginning, that we are looking at the inland ports and some of the river ports as well, the private terminals in the state. So there will be a section related to that in the port profile.
Okay.
And also to add to that, there were interviews conducted with our partnering states as well to get information from them about freight-related issues, and then we're also meeting with them separately again in a couple of weeks as well to make sure we're coordinating efforts on freight plans.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, as far as the responses, what port needs or challenges are most important? So 40% said roadway or highway connectors, followed by 30% waterway related projects, and then cargo distribution, and then funding and grant programs. Does that surprise you, Jimmy, or any thoughts on that?
No, that's that actually aligns very well with our discussions with stakeholders. You know, and I think that a lot of the projects that are coming forward will also represent that.
Okay. Well, let's move on to hazardous materials now.
So we took a look at, you know, at just an overview of the state on hazardous materials, and as you can see here on the map, this is a map of the primary pipelines throughout North Carolina and the commodities types that they represent. The yellow triangles represent product terminals where distribution or intermodal exchange can occur, coming from a pipe to a rail car or to a truck, or offloaded at a port terminal in a storage facility, what have you. The the light blue that you can see in the background represents the priority highway freight network. So you can kind of see how these pipelines interact with the freight highway. Green represents natural gas, so quite a bit of natural gas throughout the state. A lot of that for movement of product, for distribution into the different municipalities throughout the state. Empty liquid or other gas products is represented in blue. And you can see some spotting of that royal blue throughout the state. And then liquid petroleum gas, you can see that coming up, passing Fayetteville up to the Raleigh area of the state, coming out of South Carolina. And then there's a few other gas product lines, but you have to, you know, zoom in to kind of see them. But one of the main ones, you know, visible is down near the Wilmington port area. And then other product types and other product pipelines are represented in the purple, moving up through the middle of the state.
Okay, so now what are the pipeline cargo needs or challenges that are most important? Any questions here, Nastasha, while we wait for people to put in their responses? You might still be on mute if you're
Yes,
talking.
there are no changes. There are no questions at this time.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and the answers are, so yeah, very similar. Oh, that's why pipeline cargo needs. So yeah, 33% federal government support, followed by regulatory, permitting and funding, and state government support and other.
Yeah, and
Any thoughts on this?
I think that on this one, and I'll have to go back and look at our other meeting on Tuesday, but it looks like federal government support jumped up a bit here. So that's something interesting, and we'll the results of these, by the way, you know, will be presented in the various sections so that we have that stakeholder input. So yeah, and then of course regulatory, permitting, and funding programs. It all you know, sounds like what we're hearing from other stakeholders.
I assume the new IIJA bill has federal government support for pipelines, just like every other mode.
Yes, it does.
Somebody wrote, getting projects approved, permitted, and fully implemented as quickly as possible.
That's correct. Yeah, it's one of the bigger challenges as it, moving hazmat related products. It has ways of being difficult in the permitting process, challenging.
Okay. Our final section before we get into next steps, you get a new speaker with Charles.
Good morning, everybody. I'll be quick so we can have more questions. This map presents where most of the military installations are in the state. U.S. military accounts for about 12% plus of the GSP of the state. We are actually, in terms of active duty personnel, the third largest state in the union. If you add in the Pentagon, Virginia just beats us out, and then we become fourth, but we've got more active duty personnel. That accounts for about 134,000 people who are either active duty guard or the reserves. In addition to these bases that are identified, there's about 100 additional facilities. They're primarily for the guard and for the reserves, which are scattered basically from Murphy to Manteo. Most of the major military bases are east of the I-95 corridor. The one major exception, of course, is Fort Bragg, where there's quite a few commands based there, something in the range of 20, I believe. There's a lot of freight activity. You saw on some of the previous maps, both the rail and the road maps, the heat maps, where you're seeing a lot of activity. Fort Bragg tends to deploy and to return if they're going by water through the Port of Wilmington and Camp Lejeune. And if there's any movements out of Cherry Point down in Havelock, all go through the Port of Morehead City. There is rail services primarily into Camp Lejeune at Jacksonville and some into Fayetteville. And so that's something that we're looking at as an alternative to road processing. In addition, about 18,000 of the force is rotated in and out of the state every year. That typically happens within a 3 to 4 month period, typically in the spring, summer timeframe. And so that puts additional volumes on the roads. There's a significant truck depot at Fort Bragg. There's a lot of activity that's moving in and out of that facility, both using I-95, 421, which is going to be the new I-485, if I'm not mistaken, designated interstate. So that also puts some additional traffic. Havelock, where Cherry Point is, tends to be all road for moving parts in and out of fleet reserve, fleet repair east. And there's a new operation of FRC East, and that's at the Global Trans Park. So we'll be seeing the GTP become a quasi-military base in the future. And I think that's probably the highlights of this particular map. We are working with both the state military affairs department as well as the DOD and Transcom to add in additional information about traffic that's moving in and out of the ports here in North Carolina and the bases. Thanks.
So now John's going to talk about next steps.
All right, thank you. So if we go to the next slide. Just to give you an overall schedule, this project was started and we got the notice to proceed in November of 2021. Got everything rolling in early December. So I showed you at the beginning of the slides, we've already worked on the freight network assessment. We've had stakeholder interviews. There's supply chain logistics profiles, and there's a statewide freight advisory committee meeting, which many of you attending are on. We've met with them twice and plan to have a third meeting with them next month to talk about the results of the analysis and developing the goals and also the implementation strategies. We're also updating the truck parking study currently. In mid-July, this will be put out for public review comment, so everyone will have an opportunity to look at this. And then the plan is to officially adopt everything in November of this coming year, or this year, excuse me. Heather, anything to add to that?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, the next slide is on any other additional comments or questions, and then yes, here's you got to keep on going, Kip, like you were to that slide. So this is Heather and my contact information, and we also have a link on here to the site on NCDOT where the plan is hosted, and it shows the previous one, and we'll have all the new information as well. I think we've talked a lot about it. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, if you're wrapping up, John, I just wanted to thank everyone for their time. There was a lot of great feedback in this session, and so I thank you for all of that. But I just wanted to just reiterate what John was saying. If you have any questions, especially once the slides are posted about any of the content, feel free to reach out to either myself or John. The link that is showing on the slides right now is where the slides as well as the recording of these presentations will be shared. And with that, we've got like 9-10 minutes. If anyone has anything that's really critical that they would like to share with us, we've got a little bit of time.
So Nastasha, it looks like nothing's been added recently.
There is nothing that has been added. Oh, I'm sorry. One last thing. Where did you say the slides were going to be shared? So the slides will be shared on the NCDOT website at the link below. We'll make sure to also drop the link in the chat for you to be able to save the location as well.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for attending. We got some great feedback and enjoyed presenting our findings so far.